Hey guys, Aiden here. I've got a question for you. What is the worst video game ever commercially released? Now think carefully about this, because there are a lot of bad games out there, and you really gotta narrow down what your criteria is for a bad game. I think anyone can boot up E.T. for Atari and see that as a game, it isn't very good. At the same time, you can go to somewhere like itch.io and download someone's test game, which is functionally non-working. For that reason, I think one of the things you gotta factor in, besides the actual quality of the game itself, is the intent of the developer when they made the game. So an example of this is that in 1980 there was a game released called Killer Caverns. And the game was a mess. It was entirely possibility-based, or probability-based rather. As the player, you moved from right to left on a screen, and obstacles popped up at complete random. So as the player, you had no impact on the game's outcome, other than holding left button and hoping for the best. But the reason I don't consider that the worst game ever made, number one, because it did actually work and do what it was supposed to do, but it was because it was made by a 14-year-old kid as like a learning to program project, which was then released commercially through a bizarre set of circumstances, possibly outside of his control. It's hard to tell. It was the 1980s. So for the reason of intent, I'd like to bring up the game Hareraiser and its sequel, Hareraiser Prelude. But the thing is, before I can talk about those games, I really need to dig into something that came before them. In 1979, the release of the picture book and the birth of the armchair treasure hunt, Masquerade. So Masquerade was released in 1979 by an artist named Kit Williams. Now, Kit Williams had been challenged by a publishing firm to create an art book that no one had ever done before. The main problem with art books, as you may or may not be aware, is that once you get them, you flip through the art, and you go, and you're kind of done with the book. So Kit Williams' idea was to create a visual puzzle where readers would have to look closely at the illustrations in order to solve an overarching puzzle, which, as an idea, is pretty solid. It's what modern I Spy books and the like are all sort of based on. So he released this book called Masquerade, which details this guy named Jack Hare bringing a gold pendant of a rabbit from the moon to the sun as a token of the moon's affection. Upon reaching the sun, Jack realizes that he's lost the pendant, and the reader is challenged with finding its location, so they can dig it up and keep it for themselves. Or, more accurately, sell it immediately and make a ton of money. Now, when Kit Williams finished the book, he got in contact with a publishing firm and decided to make it a publicity event. So, Kit Williams and celebrity witness Bamber Gascoigne, host of University Challenge at the time, set off and buried an actual golden rabbit pendant somewhere in the United Kingdom. More specifically, it was in Ant Hill Park, but we'll get to that later. Now, the pendant itself was a beautiful piece of art made by Kit Williams himself. It was made of real gold and set with rubies and other precious stones. So, as you can imagine, it was a pretty sought-after item. Now, the promise of an expensive piece of jewelry, combined with what was actually a pretty nice art book, made this a feeding frenzy for the media, and Masquerade sold 200,000 copies in the first week alone. It even sold really well in other places in the world where they couldn't possibly solve the puzzle, because they would have to then book a flight and go to the United Kingdom on a very specific day. But again, that's getting ahead of ourselves here. So the book was a success, and for 2.5 years, Kit Williams received thousands of letters indicating wrong answers. And I don't just mean they had done it and gotten a wrong answer. I mean their methodology of solving the puzzle wasn't even close to being right. Okay, now I'm going to try and explain this puzzle as simply as I can, but bear in mind it's pretty darn cryptic, right? So, when you open the book Masquerade, the first thing you'll notice is that it follows a bit of a format. On your left is a block of text describing the story of Jack Hare bringing the pendant to the moon. On the other side is a nice painting done by Kit Williams, featuring a character doing some sort of action, surrounded with another cryptic line of dialogue, going around the border like a frame. The actual story about Jack Hare, the moon, and the pendant is completely irrelevant to solving the puzzle, because Kit Williams was an artist, not a writer. So you may as well tear those pages out of the book, because it's not going to help you solve the puzzle. That alone was a source of many people handing in wrong answers, because they read the story, think they find some clever wordplay, write in an answer, and of course it was wrong. The actual solution to the puzzle was compounded by the fact that Kit Williams had hidden tons of red herrings inside of the actual paintings themselves. So an example of this is that if you look at the text around the side of the picture, you'll notice some are written in red. If you actually take those red letters and unscramble them, you'll get a word like red fish or stone. So that's one such red herring. Another is, if you look really closely, some of the letters have little barbs on them. Those letters are also an anagram, which mean absolutely nothing in the context of the puzzle. And there are more you can dig into. There's actually a whole solution guide which digs into all these false positives and trails. The actual way you were supposed to solve the puzzle was for each character in the painting, you had to draw a line from their left eye to their furthest digit on each hand or foot. You then had to follow those lines to the letters on the outside and unscramble those letters into an anagram, which were often 2 or 3 words long. That's not the end of the puzzle, though, because once you had all those words, you ended up with a short poem. You then had to take the first letter of almost every word in the poem, but not all of them, to get the actual location close by Ampthill. There was a hint that you had to do this. He didn't expect you to come up with it on your own. But it was released in a letter to a magazine a little after the book was published. So if you just had the book to go on, you probably weren't going to find the Golden Hare. And as it turns out, even with this new information, only 3 people ever got the right answer to it. Now, the first right answer was received by a man named Ken Thomas, 6 years after the book's original publishing date. But it appears as though he had gotten his answer completely on accident and had critically misunderstood the actual puzzle. Now, Kit Williams, being 6 years after the publishing of his book, went, fine, that's good enough, let's set up and do a publicity thing of you getting the medal. It took a week between them actually getting in contact with each other and Ken Tomlin actually showing up to dig up the hare. And when he did show up, everything was a little sketchy. I'm going to show a picture of him here. He's the man with the pipe and the hat, looking away from the camera, and wearing a fake mustache. As you may insinuate, Ken Thomas was not fond of publicity, and he actually showed up in a disguise, which is weird. But regardless, the hare was found, and that was the end of it. They published the actual solution to the puzzle, and Kit Williams got a bunch of letters from people saying that his answer was wrong, and their wrong answer was the right one. Which is a good lesson for game designers, in that people are really good at self-deception and coming up with patterns where there aren't any. There's actually a book by Bamba Gascoigne about this whole subject. Alright, now we're going to start to get relevant and talk about hareraiser. So in 1984, Ken Thomas set up the software company Haresoft, using the gold rabbit pendant as collateral. When your whole gaming company is based around owning a little bit of jewelry, you might want to rethink your business plan. Anyway, regardless of that, Haresoft released their first game, Hareraiser Prelude. Alright, now I'm going to read the magazine advertisement for Hareraiser just so you can get an idea of how this was marketed to people. Okay? Hareraiser challenges you. Golden 30,000 prize. It's not an arcade game. It's not a boring adventure trek. It's a genuine puzzle that could be solved by you. Hareraiser, the unique computer treasure hunt. A computer puzzle of graphics and text in 2 parts. Each part contains vital clues to places or locations which will enable you to discover the whereabouts of this golden treasure. It has not been buried. You just need to pinpoint its location to claim this amazing prize. This puzzle has been specifically designed to break away from individual arcade involvement, a competition for all the family. Once you've collected all the clues, you can work on it anywhere, individually, or in groups. You could solve this. Part 1 Prelude, available now, at £8.95 each. Part 2 Finale, ready for Christmas. Available for these machines: the Electron Micro, the Spectrum Micro, the Amstrad, the Atari 800 XL BBCC, CBM64 MSX, the Oric Atmos, VIC-20EX, and the Tandy X Column 32K. Blanket release for every machine out there. And then there's also a picture of the pendant in a horrifyingly yellow color. So, one of the things you might have picked up on here is that it mentions there are 2 parts to the game. This is because the actual puzzle requires you to buy 2 different versions of the game. Part 1 Prelude and Part 1 Finale. Both of which were a little around £9, which, when you adjust for inflation and account for converting to Canadian currency, that's a total of around $200 Canadian by modern terms. And you really didn't need to have the game on 2 cassettes, because it could comfortably fit on 1. In fact, when you download ROMs of this game, if you want to try and play it nowadays, they include both versions on 1 ROM because it's effectively the same size or less than other games at the time. When Haresoft was asked why they were releasing this in 2 parts, it was to make it fun and enable competitors of all ages to participate. Computer magazines at the time suggested it was really just so they could make more money. Alright, I'm going to start the video now. A hair of gold and jewels was hid, it lay beneath the ground. A seeker solved the riddled clues, and the beautiful treasure was found. The hair again, a new owner seeks, one who will make history. So good luck with your quest, for the hair is at rest, to awake when you find the key. Though no hounds will you need, nor even a steed, to find this hidden prize. No spade or pick or computer trick, just a pencil, paper, and eyes. We're then immediately greeted with a screen, with some trees and some text at the bottom. Still like a lake. Okay. Early bird catches the worm, stars give extra light. Good. Here's a little yellow rabbit. Looks directly at the camera, and Gaussian blurs away, because wisdom is a truth. So the controls for this game are effectively you're using the arrow keys to navigate through different screens. And sometimes there are trees of different colors. Sometimes the sun moves around and there's clouds. Yeah, if you're lost, you're joining the majority of people that bought this game. Unlike Masquerade, there aren't any pictures to sort of leaf through. There aren't any false positives. Really, all you're getting is this. Shall you find it? No, I don't think I will. It is worth noting out that even though this was released for tons of different versions, this is the most advanced of them for the ZX Spectrum. Notably for the BBC Micro, the rabbit wasn't even yellow, it was white. I say yellow, it really is supposed to be gold. Alright, that's enough of that. Let's get back to the problems surrounding Hareraiser. So, as I mentioned earlier, the game did not sell well. And in fact, it was really only released for 1 console, the ZX Spectrum, when Hareraiser Finale was released. I'm not going to show Hareraiser Finale for a good reason. It is almost exactly the same as Hareraiser Prelude, except there are now spiders on some of the screens. If you think that this gives additional insight into solving the puzzle, let me know. I don't, actually. So, Hareraiser filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, and the Golden Rabbit pendant was auctioned off as part of a liquidator sale. Notably, however, Ken Thomas was exactly right. Even though it was evaluated at around 5,000 British pounds, it sold for 32,000 British pounds to an anonymous buyer. As it turns out, the anonymous buyer was someone from Egypt, and they eventually returned the rabbit to Kit Williams as part of a British celebration celebrating art. Alright. So we've got a bad game that was released mainly as a cash grab. But to say this is the worst game ever made would be insisting that this sort of whole puzzle is bad, not just the individual games. And that's exactly what I mean. I think that the solution to this puzzle is either so convoluted that it's impossible to find, or it just doesn't exist in the first place. We don't know for certain, because really the only person who knows the answer is Ken Thomas. Let's talk about Ken Thomas for a sec, because he doesn't exist, which is an important thing you kind of need to know. Okay, let me explain myself. Alright, so as it turns out, Ken Thomas, the person that won the Golden Hare from the masquerade contest, was actually a man named Dougal Thompson. Now, if you don't know that name, I don't blame you. But Dougal Thompson was a business partner with a man named John Card. Now, John Card was the boyfriend of someone named Veronica Robertson. Now, if you don't know that name, I don't blame you. But someone who does know Veronica Robinson was Kit Williams, because she'd been the girlfriend of him at the time when he created the contest. According to reports by the Sunday Times, she knew it was somewhere in Ampthill Park, but she didn't know exactly where. Dougal Thompson then arranged 7 separate metal detector searches of the park, to no success. He even offered the people doing the metal detector searches a large sum of cash if they claimed that they were the one to find it, if it ever turned up. Now, I mentioned earlier, really briefly, that there were actually 3 people that correctly solved the puzzle. The other 2 people were a pair of physics teachers which actually had solved the puzzle and gotten the right answer. Unlike Dougal Thompson, however, they had tried to go out and dig immediately. And it was during one of these metal detector searches where Dougal Thompson found a bunch of holes that were dug and thought, hang on, this can't be a coincidence, and then wrote to Kit Williams. The real soul-crushing part of this is that when Kit Williams went out to dig up the Golden Hare pendant, they found it in a pile of previously dug-up earth, meaning that the physics teachers had either dug in slightly the wrong spot, or they dug it up and missed it, which is absolutely heartbreaking. They were, however, the only people to correctly solve the puzzle. Unfortunately, that achievement is not set with semi-precious stones and made of metal. Gold. Well, hopefully that was interesting. Hopefully you learned something of that. I think the main takeaway here is to know that when you're playing a bad video game, think a little bit about what the intent of the developers is. The new Cyberpunk game might be full of bugs, but is it because it's a cash grab, or is it because the developers overpromised and couldn't deliver on what they wanted? When you're playing E.T. for Atari, take solace in knowing that you're actually playing a game, and that there is some finite win condition that, while cryptic, can actually be reached. And the next time you're buying some weird game off Steam made by a 13-year-old that doesn't work properly, take solace in knowing that you are actually getting a game. Alright, well, thanks for listening. Let me know if you have any questions, because there's a lot of stuff I wanted to include here, but just ran out due to time constraints. Alright, see you guys.